If you've been thinking about a career in real estate, this episode's for you. Shirley Kimmel took a couple of years to convince herself to start a real estate career, but now that she has, there's no looking back. With a Rookie of the Year from her brokerage and from RIS Media, Shirley is made up for lost time. Join us for this episode where she brings the human touch to real estate and shares how she became so successful.
Welcome to Unlocking Real Estate, My First Commission, where we dive into real stories, big wins, and early lessons learned from highly successful rookie real estate agents and brokers. This is the podcast where we explore how real estate transforms lives, one home at a time, by sitting down each week with a new agent or broker who has found incredible success in their first year. Your hosts are instructors and leaders at Colibri Real Estate School, one of the largest real estate educators in the nation, where we focus on helping people like you get started or find continued success in their careers.
Hello, and welcome to Unlocking Real Estate, My First Commission, brought to you by Colibri Real Estate. I am your host, Tina Lapp, Head of Customer Experience.
Hey, and welcome. I'm Andrew Robinson, Head of Product here at Colibri Real Estate.
We are here today with Shirley Kimmel. Will you take a moment to introduce yourself, Shirley, where you're from, where you live, what company you're with?
You bet. I'm Shirley Kimmel, and I live in Redmond, Washington. I'm with John L. Scott at Redmond at Town Center, and I've been with them for 2.5 years.
That's wonderful. So, Shirley, I'd love to explore sort of how you got into real estate, where you started, what's your why, what's your driving force. Let's start with, what were you doing before you became a real estate agent?
Well, I had a varied career, but directly before starting in real estate, I was involved in renovating houses and turning them into rentals. And so I had purchased several distressed properties and renovated them, learned kind of the ins and outs of how houses are built and what it takes to repair them. And then in the process too, we as a family had decided to build a second home over in the Leavenworth, Washington area. And so I drew the design for that and spearheaded the project and brought that to completion. So I just really enjoy the whole putting together the puzzle of real estate.
That is, what a great background as you get started. So what made you pivot and inspired you from that background to pivot then into real estate sales and building your career in real estate?
So that's an interesting question, because my life kind of took a turn, some pretty dramatic changes, and I was kind of at a crossroads. My husband of 32 years was diagnosed with cancer and passed away after just less than a year. And so everything in my life changed. And then my two sons, who I had made a decision and thankfully had the choice to decide to stay home with them. They were launched, they'd finished college, started their careers. So I needed to decide what my life was going to look like after taking a couple years of healing and kind of reevaluating. I knew I enjoyed real estate, and I had to decide if that was something I was going to pursue. And then I also had a son. One of my sons was in real estate. He was with a different company in another state, and he was enjoying it. And so really I started out thinking, I'm going to be a showing agent, part-time. I'll just do it a couple hours a day. But I still needed a license. So that prompted me to go ahead, get the training and take the exam, and that began my journey.
And what a hard situation to go through, and what strength to get through it and sort of take control and find something that you enjoy doing. How fun that your son is also in real estate. That's nice. Was there a specific person that influenced that decision or helped you through making that decision?
I would say probably mostly my son. He was encouraging me to try it out. He said you could work as little or as much as you wanted, um, and he kind of told me how the business worked for him and just how much he enjoyed it. So that was, between my experience with purchasing homes and renovating them and dealing with real estate agents in the process, because they knew the legal matters, they knew how to do all the research on the title and the forms and so forth. I knew that was a valuable asset. And so, and I, truly, I wanted to choose something that had the value of helping people and serving people. That was important to me. So I'd say those three things combined, and that prompted me to jump into the real estate world.
Well, we're glad you did, and we're glad you joined us today.
Ah,
Um,
thank you.
you're welcome. When you decided you wanted to be a showing agent, but you had to get a license, how did you choose a school? Walk me through the process.
Yeah, so it was an interesting time because the world was just wrapping up the COVID pandemic situation. So um, my only options were online at that point. It was the end of 2021. But I had some friends that were in real estate, and so I asked them what they recommended, and the name Rockwell just kept coming up. Several people said Rockwell was who they had used, and they'd recommend them. And then one friend said, be sure to take the classes in person if you can out of Bellevue. And I'm not too far from Bellevue, so I wasn't able to do it in person, but his very strong recommendation was that Rockwell was the best one. So I did a lot of online research and looked at what was available, and I really liked the different benefits that Rockwell offered. They offered the full courses that were necessary, but they also offered like the test preparation package. They offered flashcards. They offered online instructors that could assist with questions as needed. So, altogether, I just felt like that was the best value and the most sure way to pass the exam.
That makes a lot of sense. So you had to take online. What were the challenges you faced, going through the licensing process?
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge for me was the possibility of procrastination on studying, since there's not a lot of accountability when you're in a classroom, that's structured. So I had to create my own structure. And I just decided, if I'm committed to this and I'm going to get this done, I need to decide to do it every day. And I got a big calendar. In fact, this is funny because I somehow I'd heard Jerry Seinfeld questioned on how he came up with all his materials and such great jokes. And he said, I work at it every day, and I cross off days on the calendar that I work and spend time investing in my career. And I thought, that's a great idea. So I got a great big calendar, checked off every day, made a point that I didn't miss a day. I studied for 3.5 months, almost 4 months to take the exam in April. So started in January and took my exam mid-April and passed it the first time. So it was
awesome.
Very, very rewarding.
I'll bet.
Well, congratulations on that, because that is the first hurdle, right? Like everyone's goal, just get past that exam. And it's hard, especially when you haven't been in a classroom or in front of an exam in a long time. So congratulations on passing. As you were going through the classes, right? Yay. As you were going through the classes and thinking about your career and like what you're looking forward to, what were your expectations for that first year after you obtained your license?
They weren't very high. I mean, I just felt like I just needed to figure out the tools to use and kind of get used to the technology, get used to the training, take the trainings at the office at the brokerage that I settled at. And I just thought if I could have one or maybe two transactions in my first year just to kind of get my feet wet, that's all I need. So not need, but that's what I would be comfortable with. And so that was my goal, and turned out a little better than that.
Yeah, which is great, and we're gonna talk a lot about that because we can't wait to get into that. From your early days, as you're trying to get your feet wet, learn the business, learning from others, trying to figure it out, creating your calendar, which I love, by the way, that's so great. Any memorable experiences or funny experiences from your early days while you were just still learning and getting started?
Yeah, I'll share one. My very first listing was later that first year in November, and it was a person in my sphere, and she decided she wanted to downsize. So but she'd lived in this condo for 30, well, not quite 30, 27 years. And so she had it full, and the garage was full, and it was, and she didn't have the means to find homes for everything. So basically, I helped her distribute a lot of things through selling it, through donating it, through rehoming things, and that was a big job. And then, I mean, even after we got that done, then it was hiring contractors to do the painting and the carpet and minor updates, repairs. So it was just such a learning process to have. And, of course, the staging and the photography and the open houses. And I had neighborhood open houses for early entry. So it was just it was overwhelming, and yet it was so much fun to actually put all those things that I had learned into practice and see that they worked. And the funny thing is, the way it turned out was my first weekend of open houses, we received a full price offer, and it was cash, and the seller was delighted, the buyer was delighted. And I was nervous because it was first time through Authentisign and trying to use all the technology, but it turned out beautifully and everybody was pleased, and it was so satisfying.
That's how you got stuck, I bet, because not every transaction is like that. You take that any day of the week, probably.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, one of the brokers at my office said, well, what are you going to learn from that? There's no challenge to that one. And I thought, well, that's okay with me. But the challenges have come.
Okay with you.
I think you went through the challenges emptying the place out.
Right? Yeah, all the work it took.
Yeah.
So as you went through this and a pretty clean transaction, relatively speaking, we all know anything can happen in a real estate transaction, right? Who helped you through it? Did you have a mentor? How'd you get through and navigate that first transaction?
Thank goodness for my managing broker. And, I would say that for just advice to new brokers, choose a brokerage that you can get good training at, that you've got a mentor that is willing to help. Because, I called him multiple times in the evenings, on the weekends. I'm stuck on my Authentisign or whatever questions on the transaction. And so that was a huge benefit. And then also our brokerage itself, the other agents are very helpful, and it's a great atmosphere. So I would just say, I had a friend early on, I'll just share this, she said, being a real estate agent is a lonely job. And I thought, well, I don't want a lonely job because I was already alone. So, I just made a point to go to all the meetings, to go to the trainings, to be in person, not to sit home, by myself. And I think that's really important. And then you're always learning. If you're having conversations, if you're around other agents, if you're listening to discussions, you're just adding to the knowledge base. And that was huge for me because I needed the knowledge, I needed the confidence and the experience.
That's great. I mean, it sounds like you grabbed at the information, because I think getting started, knowledge creates fear if you don't have it, and it can be, scary to start a brand new career and not feel like you know everything. Were there any other challenges that you felt like you faced when you first got started?
Well, just exactly what you said, Andrew. It was, I think my tendency, and maybe for a lot of people, is to wait until you feel proficient at all the information and all the tools that are at your disposal before you actually start using them. And I, not that I did it all right, but there is something to be said about learning from just trying. And if you make a mistake, you never forget that lesson. And just, just moving forward, just making progress and putting things into action, even if you don't feel like you're 100% confident, just trying it out and just overcoming those fears of starting. I mean, sometimes just the first step is all you need, and then you get your momentum.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great advice.
So going through this, marketing is always a big thing for real estate, right? How do you get yourself out there? As a new agent, how did you market yourself? What worked for you? What channels, what techniques really helped you establish yourself as a real estate professional?
I think the one of the best things that I did was when I first started, well, actually, even before I started, I was deciding on taking the training through Rockwell, and then also my studying process, deciding to land with my brokerage. So I cataloged that on social media and just kept people aware of what I was doing. But then once I settled at my brokerage, I made a list of my sphere of friends and family, and I wrote handwritten notes to every one of them. It was over 100, and put my business card in and said, this is what I'm doing, and something personal about them and catching up with them, and just letting them know, in a personal way, that this was my new venture in life. And just from that one activity, which was, time consuming, but I had several transactions that came from that. And so I've continued that, just writing hand notes. I think often that's kind of a lost art. The other thing I'd recommend is volunteering I volunteered for every open house that was available for my brokerage. When people needed agents to show houses or to host open houses, I was all about that, and I volunteered for as many as I could get, and then just really practiced with my people skills at the open house and followed up with I think that's another key thing, is following up with people, not just the initial interaction, but then following up with them after the fact, and keeping that line of communication open is huge.
It's huge. So a lot of great advice there, especially getting started, but don't keep it a secret, right? That you're
Yeah.
you're now in real
Mhm.
estate. Is there anything else that you think helped with your success early on?
I think I would say just being consistent with my time and my habits. Starting out, I think it's really important that you form good habits and have a structure to your day. I mean, it's your business, so manage it like a business and start out with those daily habits that you do no matter what, and just keep a schedule. So you're just it takes a couple months, I would say, before a habit is formed, but that will carry through your career for as long as you're doing this business in real estate.
Yeah, that's great advice. So when you met a new client, maybe at one of the open houses that you participated in, how'd you build a relationship with someone new that you came in contact with and turn them into a client?
That is really an art, and I think for me, I had to really focus on the person themselves, and it's not about me, but it's forming that relationship and finding out what their needs and interests are and opening up that line of communication. And I think that is a skill that will translate to any career, really. But making it not about myself at all, but making it all about them, and just being able to recognize body language and some of the subtle signs, and just catering to what suits them, their type of communication, um, talking about things that they're interested in, and just asking more questions, helping them discover maybe even things that they are not aware of.
That, that totally makes sense. Do you have any particular interactions that stand out to you that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, I'll share one that was a big challenge for me, and it was I look back at it now and it makes me smile because the gentleman is a good friend, but there was a gal at my exercise class who just in passing said, "Boy, my neighbor could sure use your help." And she didn't feel comfortable giving me his phone number, so I wrote him a note and passed it through her to him, and didn't hear anything for about a month. But then he did call, and he said he wanted to meet over lunch, and so we got together. And he was very gruff and had very colorful language, and was very to the point. He didn't want any nonsense going on, and made that very clear. And so, but you know what? He had great experience with running several big companies, and he was knowledgeable, but he was in a very difficult family situation. So this house was, I don't want to make this story too long, but the house had been let go. It was full of 50 years worth of belongings, junk cars, overgrown with blackberries. Beautiful home, but let go. And so and he was not allowed to go to the house. He wasn't able to help with it. So it was a big job. It took me about 2 months to get the house unloaded and get all the contractors hired to get it in shape for market. And it came on the market in November. In fact, we're celebrating his 1-year anniversary next week over lunch. And sold for full price. He couldn't have been more pleased. And so it was just, but we had to get past that initial, did he trust me? What did he really need out of the transaction? And could we move forward and just work together?
Well, it sounds like you've got a particular skill. It's a recurring theme here of cleaning people's houses out.
Unloading houses.
Yeah. If you lived closer, maybe I'd sell my house. So you kind of got this start, right? Sounds like you wanted to do one or two transactions, but you were much more successful. And now you're on this path, right? You are a real estate agent, a very successful one. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I would just love to keep doing this. I think I may need to hire like an assistant, because I just realized there's only 24 hours in a day, and sometimes it takes me, most of that time to get it done. So I think just growing my business and maybe getting some assistance would be my goal. But as long as my health and my life situation continues, I'm just going to keep doing this, because I absolutely love the client relationships and just helping people reach their goals and their dreams with either selling or buying, and seeing them happy is so rewarding. And it gives me purpose and joy to get up every day and take on the next one.
I love to hear that. I mean, bringing purpose together with a job that's where like real careers are made. You've given us a lot of great tips on things that you've done to be successful. Volunteering for open houses. I think that's a really good one. The follow-up and being consistent. Are there any other tips and tricks that you'd like to share with aspiring real estates in the audience?
I think so often that we have the tools that we learn both in the school and in the brokerage trainings and, CE classes. And if I was to give advice to a new broker, and if I could go back and do it over again myself starting out, I would say don't hesitate to try out things that maybe make you a little uncomfortable. It took me a long time before I was willing to go door knocking, or to call a for sale by owner, or to call an expired listing. And I look back and I think, why was that so hard? But it felt awkward. I didn't know how people would respond. And I'd say my advice would be just go for it. And it doesn't always have to go well, but you'll learn something in the process about yourself and about how to do it better next time. And just try out new tools and kind of get out of your head with being fearful, because it's okay to be a little uncomfortable. That's how we learn, and that's how we grow. And you just never know. That might be tomorrow I'm closing a transaction that was an expired listing, and it was one of those things. It was a little uncomfortable to make the first phone call, but I have a very happy client now. And so it all worked out beautifully.
That's great advice, Shirley. Like, we all start somewhere. No one, we don't come out knowing everything. And so really great advice.
Thank you.
I have to ask you to talk about something a little bit. I had the opportunity to talk with a couple of folks who know you. And one of the things that really struck me about something you've done is, after working with a buyer in a closing, you actually went around the neighborhood to introduce the individual to their new neighbors. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I think that's something really special.
Well, that's interesting, because that kind of ties into the door knocking. That was part of my beginning, overcoming that self-inflicted fear that, people, but I felt like once I sold a house, I had a reason to go around the neighborhood and tell the neighbors what the house sold for, tell them about the new family that was going to be moving in, introduce myself, tell them, that if they needed my help, I was available, leave my card. And so I just felt like that was a good reason for me to visit the neighbors, and my new clients, or the clients that were moving in, benefited as well because they felt like they had a personal introduction.
Yes.
And so it was, it paid off in great benefits for me and for the new clients that were moving in.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for sharing because, I've moved before. I get it, So
Yeah.
that's a great one. So we're going to jump into the lightning round. We're going to have some fun. We're going to talk a little bit more about
sure.
who you are, things that are important to you, and sort of some different questions. Can be real estate related answers or just Shirley answers. Let's start with, what's a book that you've read that you'd recommend to the audience?
One that I just love is Andy Andrews, and it's what's the name of it now? The Noticer. And then there's a sequel, The Noticer Returns, by Andy Andrews. And it's written, you'd think it was a novel, but it's truly his life story and how he came from living under a bridge to being an incredible author and inspirational speaker. So I just think there's a lot of wisdom in that, and I love it. And then just a real estate book it's an inspiring story. The Immigrant Edge by Brian Buffini is an excellent one. I really encourage people just what it takes to start out in a career with nothing and build, a very successful career.
Yeah, those are great. If we had a time machine and you could go back to the day you started this journey, what advice would you give yourself, or what might you do differently?
Well, I think I wouldn't have taken so long to make the decision.
Love it. Great one.
It was a couple years. I debated about it and I weighed options, and I didn't want to go into it without a lot of thought and prayer and just deciding if that was the right thing for me. But I wish I could have done it in a matter of 2 months instead of 2 years, because that would have given me 2 more years to do such a fulfilling career. And so that would be my best advice for myself.
I like that. I like that a lot. If you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I think I would choose Ronald Reagan, and not because of the politics, but because he was such a communicator, a gifted communicator, that he was able to use humor. He was able to put people at ease and say difficult things in simple ways. And he was a man of faith and integrity. And I just have a lot of respect for him for those qualities.
That's a great answer. Sort of gave me chills a little bit. Tell us about your day yesterday. Like, what's a typical day? What was yesterday like for you?
Well, I was busy wrapping up some of the final details on this transaction that was It is closing tomorrow, but it was the expired listing. The buyers stopped by the house as I was doing a few things there, and they were wanting to ask questions, and then their agent called, so I was answering those kinds of things. Interesting, they want to move in early because we've lost power here, and there's power at the house with the big built-in generator. So negotiating with my sellers and how that could possibly work. But that's kind of, I just feel like sometimes in the real estate business, we get questions and challenges where we have to pivot and sort things out and help find a solution to help people just navigate those things. So that's what was my day yesterday.
Yeah, and every day is different, I would imagine.
It is, yeah. And that's kind of the beauty of it. It's never dull. There's always a new challenge. It's always exciting. And at the end of the day, it's very rewarding.
So Shirley, if listeners want to connect with you or follow your journey, can you give us where they can connect with you, where they can follow you, where they can find you?
Sure. My website, Shirley Kimmel at johnlscott.com. And then Facebook, it's Shirley.Kimmel, and then Instagram, Shirley Kimmel. So I do, kind of a variety of posts. It's not all real estate, but I try to keep it personal, but bring the real estate in. And I just love to connect with anybody that's got questions or, wants any insight from my experience. I'd be happy to share that.
Thank you, Shirley. I can honestly say that it's been a joy speaking with you today. And I think the advice you have and the ways that you found to become successful, I think can help a lot of real estate agents out there. So we really appreciate you being on the show with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrew. Appreciate you, Tina. And it's been truly my pleasure. And if this can encourage some new agents or people that are considering real estate, then I'm delighted.
Yeah, I think you're truly an inspiration, Shirley. It's a great story. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Oh, you bet. You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to Unlocking Real Estate, My First Commission. We hope today's stories and insights gave you that extra spark to keep moving forward in your real estate career. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps us reach more listeners like you. And don't forget you can watch this or other episodes on our YouTube channel. We'd also love to hear from you. Send your comments, key takeaways, or recommendations for future guests to unlockingrealestate@colibrirealestate.com.